Okay, the Gemara in Hullin and Daf Kuf Yud Amud Aleph. So I hope at the end of this shiur, B'ezrat Hashem, to give a chidush. I looked in vain for midrashim that support my theory, so I'll kind of hype it up now beyond what it should be hyped. It's a chidush that to me it seems it's so mevukash to kind of do the drasha that we'll be talking about the mitzvah of shiluach haken and what kind of hidden layer of it could be. And we'll get to it at the end. But we'll be talking about shiluach haken in general as a mitzvah. And in the context, it'll be a springboard from the Gemara in Hullin, which talks about mitzvot aseh shematan sechara b'tzidan. Right? There's not that many mitzvot that have the mitzvah listed, the reward listed next to the mitzvah. There are several exceptions to that, and we'll see them inside the midrashim, and we'll kind of give a novel interpretation to the sechara at the end for shiluach haken. Okay, so the Gemara in Hullin Daf Kuf Yud Amud Aleph. I think we'll skip most of the detail here, but basically the context is about somebody named Rami Bar Tamre, who was a student of Rabbi Yehuda. And just to kind of give the introduction, so the discussion in Hullin is about udders, right? Udders, it comes from an animal, but it has milk inside it. Is there an issue of basar v'chalav when it comes to an udder? So the Gemara tells us, "Besura lo achle kachle." So the minhag in Surah was not to eat udders at all. But in Pumbedita they used to eat udders because there's you can only eat them in a certain context, and in Surah they were machmir not to eat them at all to avoid any issues. Again, not dwelling on the halachic discussion here. Rami bar Tamre dehavi Rami bar Dikule. So this particular person, Pumbedita, who's from Pumbedita, ikla l'Surah b'ma'ale yom de Kippurei. He went to Surah on Erev Yom Kippur. Afkinhu kule alma lekachlinu shadinhu. Okay, and all the people were eating a big feast before Yom Kippur, but they threw away the udders. Because in Surah they didn't eat udders. Azaliu naktinu achlinu. And then this person, Rami Bar Dikule, who came from Pumbedita, he went out and gathered all the others and he ate them. Because he's from Pumbedita, where the minhag was to eat udders, or it was acceptable to eat udders. Okay, and the Gemara continues in kind of all this back and forth between Rav Chisda and this particular person, Rami Bar Tamre, where he keeps quoting Rabbi Yehuda's shita to explain kind of the behavior that he has, which is a bit bizarre. And then as it gets to the end of the sugya, it says as follows. The third line from the bottom. So then, as Rav Chisda and Rami Bar Tamre are going back and forth about all these halachic discussions, a person shows up in Rav Chisda's court who refused to honor his father and his mother. So he refused to do kibbur avayim. Kaftuhu. So they tied him up in order to to lash him. Okay, Amar lahu shivakuhu, and then Rami Bar Tamre said, "Leave him alone. Don't give him malkot." Titania, we taught kol mitzvot aseh shematan sechara b'tzida and beidin shelamata musarin aleh. So there's a braita which says any mitzvah aseh which has the reward explicitly listed in the Torah next to the mitzvah, the Beit Din Shel Mata is not allowed to administer any punishment for that mitzvah. What's the reason for that? Rashi says, "L'man yerichun yamecha," because when it comes to kibbur avim, the Torah tells us, "L'man yerichun yamecha," you live a long life. L'kach piresh matan sechara, and therefore the reward is listed explicitly. Lomar in lo tikaymena zeu onsho shelo titos sechar zeh. In other words, God is saying, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, if you don't do kibbur avim, you won't live a long life. Therefore, Beit Din Shel Mata does not have to come and minister malkot because your punishment is already dictated by the Torah itself. So that's the teaching of this Rami Bar Tamre in the tradition of Rabbi Yehuda. Tosfot asks, just kind of as an aside, a question. V'im toma v'aret tzedakah tichtiv patoach tiftach et yadecha le'achicha evyon. That it says by tzedakah, which is a mitzvah to say you should surely give tzedakah, and it says in that context, ki biglal hadavar hazeh yivarechecha Hashem Elokecha b'chol ma yishlach yadecha, that the reward is also listed there. So it's a mitzvah to say matan sechara b'tzida. Now, Amrina b'perek Kamad above Batur, we learn of a story, the Rava achve l'Rav Natan bar Ameh. That there's a story of Rava who forced Rav Natan bar Ameh to give tzedakah. He forcefully extracted from him 400 zuz to give to tzedakah. Doesn't that contradict the principle that we just learned? It doesn't mean that he tied him to a post and forced him physically, but just that he verbally forced him to give the tzedakah. He gave him a lot of pressure. Okay, not interesting, not relevant. And the other explanation of Tosfot is that tzedakah is not just a mitzvah aseh, so it's mitzvah aseh and a lo taseh. And when you have both together, then this principle does not apply. Okay, so that's the Gemara in Hullin about kibud ava'im. The Midrash in Dvarim Rabbah says the following: Zeh she'amar katuv or chaim pen tefales na'u mal giloteh lo teda. Ma'u or chaim pen tefales? Amar Rabbi Abba bar Kahana, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, lo tehei yoshev u'mishakel b'mitzvotei shel Torah. A person should not sit and weigh the mitzvot of the Torah. K'inyan shene'emar v'shakal b'feles harim. Lo tehei omer ho'il v'mitzvah azu gdola ani oseh ota sheskar merubah. In other words, the question that's being addressed here is there are very few mitzvot where the mitzvah is the sechara, the reward is given in the Torah. So why is that? And why are some listed but the vast majority are not? So the reason given by the Midrash is Hashem says, I don't want you to sit and play a game where you say, oh, this mitzvah has a great reward, so I'll do it. This one has a lesser reward, so I won't do it. He didn't reveal what the reward for the mitzvot are. So that everybody should do all the mitzvot with the same kind of approach. Minayin, how do we know that? Okay. And then the Midrash says there's two exceptions to this. Except for the hardest mitzvah to fulfill and the easiest mitzvah to fulfill. What is the hardest mitzvah to fulfill? And the two of them have the same reward, right? The hardest mitzvah to fulfill is to honor your parents. And the easiest is shiluach haken. Ostensibly, it's pretty simple to fulfill that. But they have the same reward. Why? In other words, to teach me the hardest, what seems to us to be the hardest mitzvah and the easiest mitzvah to fulfill have the same reward to teach me that we shouldn't try to weigh, right? That we don't understand the true reason why there's a reward for a particular mitzvah, and to emphasize that the Torah generally does not give the reward, but by two it does, the ones that we would think are the hardest and the easiest, and it gives the same reward for both to teach us that message. That's what Dvarim Rabbah understands or explains that dissonance to us. To jump now into the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKen. So I want to just read the two psukim of Shiluach HaKen inside because we're going to analyze the words very carefully. So the Torah tells us, Ki karei kan tzipor lefanecha, baderech b'chol etz o al haaretz, efrochim o betzim, ve'em rovet tzedal efrochim o al betzim, lo tikach ha'em al abanim. So if you happen upon a bird's nest on your way, in a tree or on the ground, whether it's chicks in the bird's nest or just eggs, and the mother is hovering over them, you cannot take the mother and the children together. You should surely send away the mother bird. Take the children. So it'll be good for you, and you'll live a long life. Okay, that's the entire context of Shiluach HaKen. So we see here the mitzvah of harachta yamim. The Gemara in Makot says the following: Anotel em al banim. So what happens if you violate the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKen? Rabbi Yehuda omer lokeh ve'eno meshaleach. So if you didn't listen, so Rabbi Yehuda says you get malkot for violating mitzvah aseh, but then you still get to keep it. You don't have to send away. You can't keep it, but you don't get lashes. Because Chachamim say any mitzvah that has a lo taseh and a kum aseh together, you cannot administer malkot. So here the Chachamim say if there's two coupled together, you don't give malkot, which actually ties nicely to what Tosfot had said earlier about tzedakah. That you have the aseh and the lo taseh for tzedakah, and that's why you don't necessarily administer the punishment. Okay. What is the reason for Shiluach HaKen? We always talk about, are you supposed to give tamei mitzvot, or you're not supposed to give tamei mitzvot? There's really two main schools of thought. One is much more well-known than the other. So the simple understanding of why Shiluach HaKen is a worthwhile mitzvah is brought in the Midrash in Vayikra Rabbah, where it says as follows: V'shor oseh oto v'beno lo tishchatu b'yom echad. We have a isur to slaughter a mother and a child animal on the same day. Amar Rabbi Brecha b'shem Rabbi Levi chtiv yodea tzadik nefesh be'emto. A tzaddik knows the soul of his animal. Zeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu shekatuv b'torto lo tikach ha'em al habanim. Right, that there's this idea of nefesh be'emto, that essentially that you'd be causing suffering to a mother animal by slaughtering the baby on the same day. That it's inyan of mercy, that you shouldn't be cruel in the sense that you're going to take a mother and the child and kill them on the same day. Rabbeinu Bachai kind of quotes this more intuitive or logical explanation for the mitzvah before he quotes a much less rational explanation. In his commentary on Mishulach HaKen, he says as follows: Valdat HaSechel, Shelech Tishalach HaTa'em, Tam HaMitzvah, Lelandeno Midat HaRachmanut. It teaches us to be merciful. We should distance ourselves from cruelty, because that's a bad thing to do. It's the same idea by not slaughtering a mother and a child on the same day. To be merciful, not to be cruel. Also, we have halachot around shchita, to do it in a humane way. And this is what the Rambam says in his approach to the Tam HaMitzvah. But there's another explanation. By fulfilling Shiluach HaKen, it raises mercy, the attribute of mercy, of divine mercy for the whole world. When a person sends away the mother bird, and she is in distress over the fact that she is being shooed away, knowing that her children or her eggs are still in the nest. She can't protect her children. To the point that the mother bird doesn't want to live anymore. Because for her great distress, because the mother bird is in such distress, the angel in charge of the birds asks for mercy from Hashem. Where we say in Ashrei that Hashem has mercy on his creations, when he is told, as it were, about the pain that the mother bird is feeling, this causes a divine flow of mercy for all of his creations. So we call it through Shiluach HaKen. It's essentially the opposite of what the Rambam said, where it's not teaching us rachamut, it's teaching us achzariyut. In other words, we're supposed to act in a cruel way to the mother bird, and through that cruelty, it creates this divine outpouring of mercy in the world to counterbalance the distress that the mother bird feels. And that's what it means at the end of the mitzvah when it says you will have a long life. That sending away of the mother bird, it will cause this broader, kind of more, metaphysical, divine mercy to descend into the world, and that will cause arichut yamim in a general sense. So that's a more, of course, Kabbalistic approach that's actually found in the Zohar. It's quoted in the Rabbeinu Bachaya. It's two very different approaches to the reasoning behind Shiluach HaKen.
And could this be applied to just causing any suffering to anyone? From bringing Rachamim to the world?
It's good to cause people to suffer.
Yeah, it's a very interesting perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, when I learned it, I wanted to bring it because I found it very interesting, and it's in the Zohar. It's not in the Midrashim, from what I was able to see. The traditional approach in the Midrashim, like we saw in Veikur Rabbah and in the Rambam and all that, is that it's merciful. But you're right. I mean, what differentiates Shiluach HaKen versus other types of suffering is a good question.
Beat some guy up.
Found upon them.
Sorry?
Tzar B'Lechaim is normally frowned upon.
Tzar B'Lechaim is normally frowned upon.
Animals.
Right. Good questions.
Nope.
This deserves, I think, more in-depth understanding. I'll leave it at that. There's obviously there's sodot here, like liodei chen. There's something here that is beyond our understanding, but is brought in the Rabbeinu Bachaya. So it's a good question. I don't have an answer. Before going into kind of the reason I brought this is for the final chidush at the end, to kind of explain perhaps the difference between shulach haken based on how we'll understand it, based on these two different interpretations. Before that, I just want to reference this idea of em al banim, and this will lead into the final chidush. Right, it's not unique to shulach haken. Right? This concept of even the words of em al banim appears in other places in the Torah and in Tanakh as well. This idea of a mother with the children. The first time that it really appears is in a tefillah that Yaakov Avinu gives when he is confronting Esav. So he says, "Kantonti mikol hachasidim u'mikol ha'emet asher asita et avdecha." He's talking to Hashem. Right, he says, "I'm not worthy of all the chesed that you have given to me. Because when I went to Haran, I had nothing, and now I've become rich, and I have this family and all this wealth. Atzileni na miyad achi miyad Esav. Save me from my brother from Esav. Ki I am afraid of him. Pen yavo v'ikani. He'll come in and he'll strike me down. Em al banim." And we know that Yaakov, he does this strategic approach where he splits up his family and he divides it up into two camps. And the reason he does that is because he's afraid that everyone will be wiped out at once. But he uses this phrase of em al banim. What does em al banim mean? So it means annihilation. An annihilation, not just the mother and the children, means wiping out of all potential future. As Radak says, "V'chein v'kam she'on be'amecha v'chol mivtzarecha yushad kishod shalman."
Dibur HaMaskal is im banim.
Em im banim.
Not al banim.
I think that's probably just a typo, if I had to guess. I think that's a typo.
Or it's explaining it. Okay.
No, you're right, sorry. Yes, you're right, sorry, I apologize. Em im banim, that's what it means, sorry. Em al banim means em im banim, you are correct. It means mother and children. V'chein, thank you. V'kam she'on be'amecha v'chol mivtzarecha yushad kishud shaman beit arbel b'yom milchama em al banim rutasha. Okay, in Hosea, it's talking about this war where Beit Arbel was wiped out by Shalman. Okay, during war, em al banim rutasha, which rutasha means annihilated, that everybody was just wiped out. So the context of Yaakov Avinu is em al banim, and also in Hosea is em al banim, or im banim, is that there's no future, right? And perhaps that's kind of another layer to the mitzvah of shulach haken, where it talks about, right, it's almost almost an environmental approach to the mitzvah, where why is shulach haken important? Because if you take the mother and the children, then you are exterminating the species. There's no potential for continuing them, right? So you need to do it. And this is a kind of an interesting shot. I heard this from my father, Rabbi Muluri, actually, that why will it be good for you? Because you need eggs. So if every time you take the mother, you take the eggs also, then there won't be any future mothers who lay eggs, because there won't be the eggs that hatch, and then you will wipe out the ability in the future to eat eggs. So it's for your own sake that you want to make sure that you have that species continue in the future. That's v'alach tayamim, in like a very kind of pragmatic sense. So it's also an interesting shot that I think you could read into the phrase of em al banim that's brought up in other places in Tanakh. Okay. So I've hyped up enough the chiddush that I want to give. So the context. So the context is the word kikrei kan tzipor lefanecha. The word tzipor is a bit unusual. We know tzipor comes up, but there's also the word of. What is the difference between tzipor and of? So the Gemara later on in Hullin actually understands from this a halachic implication that it's taught of tameh patur milishalech, that the mitzvah of shulach haken only applies by a kosher bird. It does not apply by a non-kosher bird. The reason being, you're not allowed to take the eggs. So if I shoo away the parent bird of an unkosher species and take the eggs, so I shouldn't have done. I'm not allowed to eat those eggs, but I'm patur for shulach haken. I've violated another issur of eating non-kosher birds, but the mitzvah only applies by kosher birds. Mina lemine. So the Gemara asks, how do I know this? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak d'Amar ka ki karei kan tzipor lefanecha. It says tzipor. Of mashmalan ben tahor ben tameh. Whenever the Torah uses of, it means regardless of the status of the bird. Tzipor tahor eshkechan dikret tzipor tameh lo eshkechan dikret tzipor. But the fact that it says kikrei kan tzipor means a kosher species. As Rabbi Yitzchak says, whenever it says tzipor, that means only kosher. When it says of, it means both. The Gemara then proceeds for an Amud Plus to try to refute that from all sorts of sources. But be it as it may, that's what Rabbi Yitzchak understands from the word tzipor as opposed to of. I'd like to now argue that perhaps the word tzipor here means something very different, and it's no accident that it uses tzipor instead of of. Remember, if we looked at Shiluach HaKen, there's only 2 psukim, and what's unique about Shiluach HaKen, aside from the fact that it brings Arichut Yamim as the reward, is that it's unique in the sense that it doesn't appear anywhere else in the Torah. Meaning, a lot of the mitzvot in Devarim appear also in Vayikra, also in Shemot, also in Bamidbar. They're repeated. Shiluach HaKen only appears here, and it appears with this very rare Matan Sechara B'tzida and Arichut Yamim in particular. And the question is, why is that? So I'd like to argue that if we look at the next source, which is the very beginning of Parshat Yitro, we'll find that there's a lot of similarities between this description and the description of Shiluach HaKen. We're told as follows, Shmot Perek Yudchet, Vayishma Yitro Chohen Midyan Choten Moshe, Et Kol Asher Asa Elohim Nu Moshe El Yisrael Amo, Ki Yotzi Hashem Et Yisrael MiMitzrayim. So Yitro, the father-in-law of Moshe, hears about Kriyat Yam Suf and the Makot and all the things that Hashem did. He took them out of Egypt. Vayikach Yitro, and be sensitive to the words here. Vayikach Yitro Choten Moshe, Et Tzipora Eshet Moshe Achar Shiluchea. Yitro takes Tzipora, the wife of Moshe, after she was sent away. Ve'et Shnei Banea, and she was sent away with her 2 sons. Asher Hashem Achad Gershon, Ki Amar Geriti Be'etz Nochera, V'Shem Achad Eliezer Ki Olei Avi B'Zvi V'Yatzenu B'Chel Paro. The 2 sons are Gershon and Eliezer. So we have here the idea of Shiluchea, right? Who was sent away? Tzipora. So the mother bird is sent away. Vet Shnei Banea, the context of with her 2 sons. And there's an idea of Kicha, Vaikach Yitro, which reminds us of the idea that you should not Shaleach teshalach et ha'em ve'et habanim tikach lach. All those words appear in this context. And to really understand maybe if there's a connection between these, we should first look at the Midrash to understand when this happens, as far as we knew, Tzipora was with Moshe. Now, as we never heard about Tzipora, Tzipora goes down with Moshe to Mitzrayim. We're told about that explicitly. There's a story of Chatan Damim, then all of the Makot, and then we're told suddenly that Tzipora was sent away. Why was she sent away? When was she sent away? It's not clear from the Psukim. So there's really 2 approaches in the Midrash. One approach is found in the Mechilta Rabbi Yishmael. It says as follows: V'kach Yitro choten Moshe Tzipora shel Moshe achar shiluchea. Rabbi Yeshua Omer achar sheniftara mimenu beget. Moshe divorced Tzipora. Nemar kan shiluach v'nemar lan shiluach. It says shiluchea. It says also the idea of shlicha by a get. Ma shiluach le'amur lehalan get, af kan get. Okay. Rabbi Eliezer Amudai Omer le'achar sheniftara mimenu b'ma'amar. It's not that Moshe divorced her, but he sent her away kind of with a verbal command or with a verbal request. שבשעה שאמר קדוש ברוך הוא למשה, לך הוצא את עמי בני סום ממצרים, שנאמר ואתה לך ושלחך אל פרעה. So when Hashem told Moshe, go down to Egypt, when he was in Midian, באותה שעה נטל אשתו שני בניו, והיה מלחם למצרים. He brought Tzipora and his sons down with him, שנאמר, ויקח משה את אשתו ואת בניו, ויקבם על החמור, וישב ארצה מצרים. The Torah tells us that explicitly. He went down to Egypt with Tzipora and the sons. באותה שעה נאמר לאהרון, לך לקראת משה. Aaron went to meet Moshe on the way. We're told that as well. Yatsa likrat Moshe v'chibkov nishko. Remember, Aaron and Moshe hadn't seen each other, perhaps ever, but certainly not since Moshe left Mitzrayim. So it's a reunion or perhaps even a first meeting. Amar lo Moshe hechanaita kol shinim alalu. So Aaron says to Moshe, where were you all this time? While we're all suffering in Mitzrayim. Amar lo b'Midyan. Moshe says to him, I was in Midyan. Amar lo ma taf v'nashim eloimach. So Aaron says to Moshe, who are these people with you? So Moshe says, Amar lo ishti v'banai. This is Tzipora and my sons. Amar lo, Aaron says to Moshe, Ulana tamalicham, where are you bringing them? Amar lo, Mitzrayim, I'm coming down to Mitzrayim and I'm bringing them with me. Amar lo, Aaron says to him, Ala rishonim anu mitzta'arim, ve'achshav nitzta'er gam ba'elu. So Aaron says to Moshe, we're all slaves, we're suffering terribly. You're bringing down your wife and children to also be enslaved? Why would you do that? באותה שעה אמר לציפורה, so Moshe turned to Tzipora and said to her, לכי לבית אביך. He sent her back home. ובאותה שעה הלכה לבית אביה ונטלה שני בניה, and she took Gershom and Eliezer with her, לכך נאמר אחר שילוחיה. That's what it means, אחר שילוחיה. It's not that Moshe divorced her, he sent her away. What's the difference between Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer here? Yep.
There's no difference. I was just going to point out that according to Yeshua, it's a very interesting parallel, because if so, assuming that he remarried her when Yeshua brings her,
Okay.
There's a very interesting parallel with him and his parents, because Amnon does the same thing. He divorces and then he remarries his wife after he gets Chacha from Miriam. Then they have Moshe.
I hadn't thought of
goes and
that.
does the same thing.
Very good. That's interesting. Yeah. He echoes that. That's good. I hadn't thought of that. Yep. Achar Shilucha, and then they reunite. There's definitely more to that. I'll think about that more. Yeah. What's the difference between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Elazar? How is Moshe's relation to Tzipora in these two? I would argue, Rabbi Elazar Amodai, it's a move of
I was
Rahmanut,
going to say, one is more loving, one is more divorcing.
and one is Achzariyut, right? No, one is we're not given explanation for why he divorces her. Oh, we're almost done. Okay, 1 second. Rabbi Yeshua doesn't give an explanation for why he gives her a get, but it's usually divorces in some context of acrimony, versus the second opinion where he's doing it in order to save her from the suffering of Mitzrayim. And so it's two very different approaches for what the Shiluach Tzipora was for. Was it in order to engender? Was it Moshe being a Rahman or Moshe being an Achzar?
Is the second opinion definitely saying that he didn't divorce it? Meaning he could have still done the same thing, just for a different reason. When Aaron said this and then he sends her back, according to that opinion, he didn't divorce her? He would just go back and hang out? Basically?
I think because Rabbi Elazar says Niftar b'ma'amar, meaning he's giving a different opinion to the get. I guess they don't have to conflict, but he's not saying it was a get. It was a shiluach. Go back to.
Also could say achar gerusha or something.
Right. It's just interesting if he didn't. Like if he chose to send her back. I mean, we're learning Gittin now.
He said shiluchia, which means
Gittin l'chum. All these different options. They go to the sea. They would always give a get in case they didn't come back. Like he's going to a war zone and he's like, go back.
Oh, a get to the milchama like David gave to, like Uriah gave to Bathsheba type of thing.
I'm saying it would be interesting if he didn't.
Yeah.
Even in the Rachman's option, if he was sending it back, like l'chayra, he would have also anyway.
Yeah, I guess you could understand. It's not. You could read Rabbi Elazar Modai is not arguing on Rabbi Yeshua necessarily, but just. I think pshat is that they're giving two different interpretations. One is with a get, and one is just he sent her away to prevent her from being in, so that she wouldn't have to go through the suffering in Mitzrayim. But you could say that he was even his niftar miman b'mamar was also a form of gerushin, perhaps. I don't necessarily think that's the pshat here, but I also don't. I see how you could understand it that way.
The point is, he said shiluchia, so he means that Moshe sent her back.
Yeah.
Because he was Achman. That's why also the Torah using shalach to shalach etayim al.
Good. So that's what right. So that's where I'm going with this. Is I want to argue now, and this is the last kind of piece of the puzzle. Moshe is commanded by Hashem. When Aaron is supposed to die, Moshe is told to Hashem, go up with him to Hor Ahar with his son Elazar, take his bigdei kuna, put them on Elazar, Aaron will die there, and then come back down the mountain. And why does Moshe have to be there for that? The Torah doesn't say. It also doesn't say how he felt, but why was Moshe present in that ceremony? What was the relevance? So Bamidbar Rabbah says, Kachet Aaron, Moshe is commanded to take Aaron up to Hor HaHar, v'afshet, strip him of his clothes. The Midrash says, Amar lo Kadosh Baruch Hu, Harei at menachamo. You will be a source of comfort for him in his dying moments. Shehu morish kitro levanav, because Aaron will see that you are taking his legacy of Kuna Gdola and his son is inheriting that legacy. And he'll see you're doing that, and he'll say, I now get the legacy passed on through my child, what my brother Moshe will not get. Right? Because Moshe, when he dies alone, and he doesn't have his children there to inherit his legacy, but Aaron will get that. So Moshe being there is a source of nechama for Aaron, and that's why he's commanded by Hashem to go up with him. And I think, just to tie all this together, right, how does Moshe Rabbeinu feel about the fact that his sons are not part? Right? Yoshua is the one who takes over after him, right? It's not Gershom, it's not Eliezer. And why that is not necessarily clear, but how does he feel about that? So I'd like to argue that perhaps we could read in Shiluach HaKen, Moshe is saying this at the end of his life, right? In Dvarim Chaf Bet, it doesn't appear earlier in the Torah. This is just Moshe kind of giving his final series of mitzvot as he's about to finish kind of his task and pass on the role to Yoshua. So perhaps we could read it like this. Shaleach, he says, okay, Shaleach teshalach et ha'em. So if you're going to send away the tzipora, you're going to send away the mother bird, et abanim tikach lach. Make sure to take the sons with you. Don't do what I did. Moshe is reflecting now on his life, in his old age. At the end of his life, he's saying, I sent away tzipora, and she took the kids with her, right? And therefore, I don't have a legacy, right? Unlike my brother Aaron, who his son gets to kind of inherit, who he gets to inherit to his son, because I sent tzipora away, ben beget, ben b'ma'amar. In the end of the day, Gershom and Elazar are not here. They're not part of Am Yisrael, not part of the legacy. I have to give it to Yoshua. My sons are not here. So he's saying, Shalech teshalach et ha'em. If you're going to send away the tzipora, the mother bird, et abanim tikach lach, right? Take the children. And why? L'mani tavlach v'arachta yamim. I'd like to argue v'arachta yamim doesn't mean you will live a long life. He's saying a legacy, right? If you take the sons, you take the children, you'll have a legacy. Not like me. I'm looking now at the end of my life. My children are nowhere to be found. My legacy ends here. I don't get to go into Eretz Yisrael. My son's not part of this. I pass it on to Yeshua. It's beyond me. Unlike Aaron, he has a legacy. L'mani tavlach v'arachta yamim will be good for you. Ultimately, I had to sacrifice that. I sent away tzipora, and I didn't do it. Embedded, perhaps, in the mitzvah Shiluch HaKen is Moshe's reflection on his life and giving kind of musar to Am Yisrael and saying, Im tishalech ha'em ve'banim tikach lach. And to kind of complete the parallel of the Medrash and the Mechilta, we saw there's two reasons for Shiluch HaKen. Do you do it b'achzari, do you do it b'achmaniyut? Perhaps you could read that back in as well. That Moshe is saying, right, whether you do a Shiluch HaKen to be merciful on the mother, so for whatever reason you need to send her away for her sake, to do kindness to her, or whether achzariyut because to forget, either way, you have to make sure that banim tikach lach. Whatever the circumstances are, make sure that you have kind of values that pass on, that you're able to pass on through your children, so that it'll be l'mani tavlach v'arachta yamim. Because otherwise, when you have achar shiluchev et shnei banea, she takes the kids, and then you won't be a source of, you'll be a source of nechama for other people, but you won't get that nechama for yourself. And perhaps that's Moshe Rabbeinu. Again, I know it's not pshat, it's not even midrash, but I think it's the words are so similar between the description by Yitro and the description Shiluch HaKen that I think it's a very kind of fascinating way to read into kind of what Moshe was thinking and trying to read that back into Shiluch HaKen and also give an explanation for Arachta Yamim that's maybe different from Dvarim Rabbah, right? What does Dvarim Rabbah say? Okay, Arichut Yamim by Kibur Avayim, Arichut Yamim by Shiluch HaKen. To teach you that every mitzvah, you don't know the real value. So I'm going to give it by the chamur shebachamura and the kal shebakala. But if arichut yamim is not you physically will live a longer life, but you will have a legacy, v'arachta yamim. So the two examples of that are this example because ved abanim tikach lach, and of course kibud avayim, because if you honor your parents, your children will see that and honor you, and then your legacy will pass on through them. So your atzon that we should be able to get arichut yamim, bein long life, bein, but our children should be a source of nachat for us, and yeah, that's it. That's
Yeah.
There's actually a third place that says that you're consuming the weights and measures. Like no one talks about it. It's very interesting.
the Medrash says chutz mishtei mitzvot, right?
Yeah, in the end of Kitse, it talks about that you should have like honest weights and measures.
Oh, interesting. It's also a good name.
Laman,
Like 8%.
That could also
same parsha, it's end of Kitse, it's in Shulchan, we're getting to the beginning. Okay? It says, Evan Shema v'tzedek yalach, Yifa Shema v'tzedek yalach, Laman yarichun yamecha. I want them up. Like it never, like,
the
everyone always
Medrash
talks
never
about.
mentions.
Yeah, everyone always talks about keep it up.
Could be their version. I wonder what the Septuagint says there.